Most people believe they make their own choices, but they rarely ask who or what is doing the choosing. We live each day thinking we are in full control of our thoughts, our desires, our fears. We build identities, tell stories about who we are, and carry memories we think are ours alone. But what if I told you, you are not alone in your mind? Have you ever dreamed of symbols you've never seen? Felt drawn to a story from another culture as if it were your own? Or looked into the eyes of a stranger and felt a strange familiarity? These are glimpses, cracks in the mirror of something deeper. Something Carl Jung called the collective, unconscious. We think of the mind as a private place, uniquely ours. But the truth may be far stranger. You may be sharing that space with every soul that ever lived. In this journey, the collective unconscious, Jung's vision of humanity, will explore the hidden architecture of the human psyche, a vast ancestral blueprint of shared dreams, inherited myths, and unconscious connections. We'll examine Carl Jung's revolutionary concept of the collective unconscious, the universal mind we're all born into. We'll uncover the archetypes that shape our identities, the shadow that haunts us, and the eternal dance between anima and animus, the masculine and feminine within. If the search for self-awareness speaks to you, subscribe and turn on the bell. These are the kinds of questions that don't leave us unchanged. This isn't just a psychological deep dive. It's a mirror, a map, a myth, and maybe the key to understanding who we really are. To begin our journey, we need to understand what Carl Jung meant when he proposed the idea of a collective unconscious. This wasn't simply a metaphor. It was a radical rethinking of how the human mind functions. While Sigmund Freud focused on the personal unconscious, the repressed thoughts and emotions of the individual, Jungian psychology suggested something much larger, a shared unconscious that contains universal symbols, mythical patterns, and ancestral wisdom. In addition to our immediate memories and life experiences, Jung wrote, there exists a deeper layer, a psychic inheritance, common to all, of humanity. This collective unconscious isn't something we learn, it's something we are born into. Just as your body carries genetic traits passed down through generations, your psyche carries psychological archetypes, ancient, symbolic, patterns embedded in your unconscious mind. It is here we find the blueprints of heroes, mothers, tricksters, mentors, the very structure of myth and story. These patterns surface not only in dream analysis, but in religion, folklore, literature, and even modern pop culture, spanning cultures, centuries, and continents. Think of it as a kind of psychic DNA, not just inherited memory, but collective memory. And if that sounds mystical, remember, the brain evolved through survival. Shared symbols and emotional instincts weren't luxuries, they were maps to navigate life and death. And those maps still echo in our behaviors today. This is the beginning of depth psychology, the attempt to chart the inner world as one would map a forgotten continent. And at the center of it all lies a paradox. The more deeply we look into ourselves, the more we find others looking back. What is an archetype? To Jung, archetypes are primordial symbols, timeless psychic patterns woven into the fabric of the human psyche. These aren't ideas we invent, but forms we discover. Think of them as emotional blueprints, inherited, psychological structures that shape our thoughts, fears, dreams, and stories, regardless of culture or age. In myths, dreams, films, and even fairy tales, we encounter recurring figures. The hero, who must rise, the mother, who nurtures and destroys, the shadow, who tempts and terrifies, the wise old man or woman who guides, the trickster who disturbs and transforms. These aren't characters we just read about. They live inside us. Jung described archetypes as residing in the collective unconscious, influencing our behaviors without conscious awareness. They manifest in symbols, in dreams, in ancient myths, and even in modern advertising and popular culture. Why do people across the globe respond to the same types of stories? Why does every culture have gods, monsters, creation tales, and apocalypse. Myths, because we're not just telling stories, we're telling ourselves. Archetypes are the internal mythologies of the shared human experience, shaping how we love, fear, fight, and grow. And they reveal something else too, something darker. If the hero is our light, then the shadow is our darkness. In depth psychology, the shadow represents the repressed, hidden aspects of ourselves, the parts we deny, disown, or refuse. To acknowledge our rage, our envy, our lust, our shame. But here's the truth. The shadow isn't evil. It's honest. The shadow is not what we want to be. It is what we are, underneath our social masks, the raw truth of the unconscious mind. In Jungian psychology, the act of confronting the shadow, of seeing what we fear within ourselves, is called shadow work. This psychological healing journey is essential for true self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and personal transformation. When we fail to integrate the shadow, we project it. We see our darkest traits in others, not in ourselves, and so conflict, hatred, and fear multiply. But when we dare to face it, we gain strength, for only those who face the darkness may find their light. She stood at the edge of the mirror, afraid not of what she might see, but what she might recognize. If you felt that tremor, that curiosity pulling you closer to truth, don't turn away. Let this moment echo, like, comment, or subscribe, and step further into the deep. In each of us lives a polarity, not just biologically, but psychically. Jung called this the Anima and Animus, and the masculine within the feminine. These are not genders, but psychological archetypes that represent emotional balance, intuitive wisdom, assertive clarity, and the full range of the inner self. The anima, feminine soul image in men, may appear in dreams as a maiden, mother, enchantress, or guide. The animus, masculine soul image in women, may appear as a warrior, sage, or divine judge. When these archetypes are rejected, they become distorted, warping our relationships, our creativity, our self-understanding. But when embraced, they form the foundation of empathy, psychological healing, and inner transformation. The anima and animus help us transcend the limits of ego. They allow us to touch something universal, a shared wholeness beyond roles or identity. This is the dance of the inner psyche, the alchemical union of opposites, the key to conscious evolution. Dreams, not just fragments of memory, but messages in metaphor. Carl Jung saw dreams as the language of the unconscious mind, revealing the hidden archetypes and symbols we inherit, not invent. A serpent in a dream doesn't merely mean fear. It may represent transformation, temptation, healing, or ancient wisdom, depending on the dreamer's cultural mythos. These aren't random images. They're part of the symbolic vocabulary of the collective unconscious, patterns that speak across borders, religions, and generations. This is what makes Jung's theory so profound. It doesn't just explain individual psychology, it explains the psychology of humanity. Across cultures, we find recurring myths of creation and destruction, floods and rebirth, underworlds and heavenly ascents, tricksters and redeemers, wolves, serpents, dragons, symbols of fear and power. These aren't borrowed stories. They are reflections of the collective psyche, rising from deep within the shared unconscious of our species. This is the field of cross-cultural psychology, where we observe that different people, separated by continents, dream in the same shapes, symbols, and moral patterns. A Japanese Shinto priest, an Egyptian mystic, a modern therapist, all may describe the same internal journey with different names for the same archetypal truths. It's no wonder that when we hear ancient myths, they feel familiar, like remembering something we didn't know we forgot, because the collective unconscious isn't about what we know, it's about what we recognize. Let's bring this home, not just philosophically, but personally. You wake up anxious, unable to explain why. You're drawn to a person you barely know. You feel haunted by dreams of falling, flying, or standing on the edge of something vast. What if these moments aren't random? What if they're echoes of ancestral wisdom, embedded in your subconscious as emotional code? The collective unconscious impacts your daily life in subtle, powerful ways. It influences your fears, the dark, ancient fear of abandonment or betrayal. It shapes your longings to belong, to rise, to become more than what you are. It guides your growth, pushing you into relationships, challenges, and inner battles that reflect deeper psychological archetypes. Even our most personal experiences are shaped by collective patterns. Why do stories of the chosen one or the fall from grace resonate across time? Because they reflect a shared inner journey, the mythic arc we all unconsciously travel. We are each walking our own path, but we are guided by trails carved by thousands before us. So what now? We've peered into the abyss of the unconscious, but where do we go from here? Jung believed the next step in human evolution wasn't physical, it was psychological. It was a shift from ego consciousness to collective awareness, a recognition that we are not isolated minds, but threads in the same tapestry. The more we understand the collective unconscious, the more we develop empathy by realizing that others carry the same fears and hopes. Experience psychological healing by facing and integrating the shadow. Embark on a profound inner journey, connecting personal growth to universal truth. This is the path of self-discovery and self-transcendence. The future lies in embracing our inner child, confronting our inherited trauma, and awakening to the universal symbols that surround us. In art, in nature, in silence, and perhaps in doing so, we can bridge the gap between self and other, past and future, myth and memory. The collective unconscious isn't just Jung's theory, it is humanity's inheritance and its destiny. So, what now? We've peered into the abyss of the unconscious, but where do we go from here? Jung believed the next step in human evolution wasn't physical, it was psychological. It was a shift from ego consciousness to collective awareness, a recognition that we are not isolated minds, but threads in the same tapestry. The more we understand the collective unconscious, the more we develop empathy by realizing that others carry the same fears and hopes. Experience psychological healing by facing and integrating the shadow. Embark on a profound inner journey, connecting personal growth to universal truth. This is the path of self-discovery and self-transcendence. The future lies in embracing our inner child, confronting our inherited trauma, and awakening to the universal symbols that surround us. In art, in nature, in silence, and perhaps in doing so we can bridge the gap between self and other, past and future, myth and memory. The collective unconscious isn't just Jung's theory, it is humanity's inheritance and its destiny. You've reached the end, or at least the edge, but this journey doesn't stop here. If tonight's exploration stirred something in you, a memory that wasn't yours, a question that doesn't fade, follow the trail. Visit our curated playlist on Jungian Psychology, Dream Symbolism, and Depth Psychology, linked below. And remember, the most powerful stories are not the ones we read. They're the ones we recognize, the ones that awaken something ancestral. Subscribe, comment what symbols have followed you, and above all, don't look away from the shadows. They're the only places that ever showed us the light. See you in the next video.